If you crave the unknown, but fear the dark, then Delphi. After dawn is your sanctuary. As the first light of dawn breaks through the night, we embark on a journey into the mysteries that chill the spine. I'm your host, Jason King, and together, we'll explore the stories that lurk in the shadows. Each episode, we unravel chilling tales of unsolved crimes, police corruption, and heart-wrenching disappearances. Imagine a world where over 600,000 people vanished last year alone in the U.S., leaving behind only questions and heartache. Violent crime is on the rise, and the shadows grow longer each day. By joining us, you become a beacon for the voiceless, a light in the darkness. Together, we'll shine a light on society's darkest corners, uncovering the truths that hide in plain sight. From the eerie silence of abandoned buildings to the bustling streets where secrets are whispered, we leave no stone unturned. Tune in to Delphi After Dawn, where understanding is just a story away. Join us and let the journey begin. As we delve deeper, remember that every story has a heartbeat, a pulse that connects us all. We navigate through the labyrinth of human experience, seeking answers and shedding light on the unknown. So prepare yourself for a journey like no other, where every revelation brings us closer to the truth. Delphi. After Dawn is more than just a podcast. It's a community of seekers, united by curiosity and compassion. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Join us and let the journey begin anew. In the shadows of the city, where secrets are commodities and trust is a luxury, one man delves into the minds of the monstrous. Welcome to the world of Jason King, a detective with a mind as sharp as a scalpel and a heart as resilient as steel. Beneath the ordinary scenes of daily life, grim tales of notorious serial killers lurk. Each one, unique in their madness, leaves behind a chilling legacy of victims and unsolvable puzzles. But the twisted minds of these murderers never elude Jason King. With every episode, the stakes rise. Every grim detail, each hideous crime, King peels back layer by layer. In a world where evil is the norm and horror is the narrative, Jason King remains steadfast. His mission? To uncover the dark consciousness of terror. His promise? Justice. This is Jason King's world, where crime is not just confronted, but comprehended. Dive deep into the chilling tales of serial killers with Jason King. This video is for educational entertainment and documentary purposes. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Hey true crime fans, welcome to Delphi After Dawn Crime Stories with Jason King. In this episode, we're diving deep into the chilling tale of Reverend Jim Jones and the People's Temple. From his humble beginnings to becoming a pastor and ultimately a mass murderer. This story is not for the faint-hearted. Born in 1931 in Indiana, James Warren Jones seemed like any other kid. But behind his charismatic exterior, a darker side lurked. By the 1950s, he was preaching in Indianapolis, gaining a following with his fiery sermons and promises of a utopian society. But as the People's Temple grew, so did Jones's thirst for power and control. He moved his followers to California and eventually to the isolated jungle of Guyana, where Jonestown was born. It was here that his delusions of grandeur turned deadly. In November 1978, the world would witness a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Over 900 men, women, and children lost their lives in a mass murder, suicide, orchestrated by Jones himself. This horrifying event is now etched in history as one of the darkest chapters of modern times. So fasten your seatbelts, because I'm about to take you on a wild ride of horror and mass murder. Remember, this film is for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Thanks for tuning in to Delphi After Dawn. Crime Stories with Jason King. Stay safe and stay curious.
At the time, constituents reached out to Ryan about their American family members living in a remote jungle in Guyana under the leadership of Jim Jones, the controversial pastor of the People's Temple. In an attempt to investigate, Ryan led a congressional delegation overseas, along with the team from NBC News, in hopes of meeting Jones and his followers. Speer was at his side.
One of the tactics out there at People's Temple is to delay.
They waited 3 days before getting permission to tour the compound that housed over 900 people. They were met with smiling faces and later cheering crowds.
I think that all of you know that I'm here to find out more about questions that have been raised about your operation here. Whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
Speer remembers that moment and feeling unsettled by the response. That same night, church members secretly began to pass notes to the delegation about their desire to leave. The next day, the team got to work.
Now, do I both understand you to say that you both want to leave Jonestown on this date, November 18, 1978?
Yeah.
What is your wish today?
To go back home.
And where is home?
U.S.
When Jim Jones was questioned about losing members, he responded.
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about lies? Anybody wants to get out of here can get out of here.
Then on November 18th, the unthinkable happened. The delegation, including 15 defectors, were trying to leave the country when they were ambushed. Ryan and 4 others, including NBC News correspondent Don Harris and photojournalist Bob Brown, were killed. NBC soundman Steve Sung was wounded. Speer was shot 5 times at point-blank range. And back at the compound, Jones led more than 900 of his followers to their deaths after instructing them to drink a cyanide-laced beverage. Speer waited nearly 24 hours for medical attention and somehow, after sustaining life-threatening injuries, survived it all.
Reverend Jones, how do you account for such an avid following as you seem to have?
I'm principled and dedicated to my people.
Fail to follow my advice, you'll be sorry. You'll be sorry.
This is the way it is if it's what it ought to be. The American manners are nothing like these. Right, Jim? Yep. Oh, we have row after row of these. Whole warehouse full. We even sell bananas now also because we're trying to make money. We need money so badly to take care of all of our family to save them. This guy says he's still staying with us. He says, if we want to, he told me that he'd go back and bite Ford's ass for us. Yeah, this good guy here.
It was a mass murder that transfixed the world. The victims, almost 1,000 men, women, and children, who had followed Jim Jones, a charismatic church leader promising peace and love in the jungles of South America. The State Department ignored signs of trouble, and Jones had political connections.
I'm from the United States government, and we're here to inquire into the health and the welfare of American citizens who are here.
But California Congressman Leo Ryan and his 28-year-old staff attorney, Jackie Speer, were hearing something much darker.
There were defectors who came out and were talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse, and that people were not allowed free will, that there was mind control involved.
She had premonitions, leaving behind a letter to her parents.
Mom and Dad, I love you. Should anything happen, be proud because my life has been filled with the love you have given me. I have no regrets. Love, Jackie.
At first, they saw smiling faces and cheering crowds. But then a man passed NBC correspondent Don Harris a note some wanted out.
Last night, someone came and passed me this note.
And when I looked at that note, my heart just sunk, because I knew that everything we were afraid of was true, and that this was a charade that we were watching.
Spears started taking statements from people who wanted to leave.
What is your wish today?
To go back home.
And where is home?
U.S.
Anybody wants to get out of here can get out of here. We have no problem about getting out of here. They come and go all the time.
But when they tried to go, taking people with them, tensions exploded.
You bring those kids back here!
There were couples with children in which one was pulling the child one way, the other way, because one wanted to stay, one wanted to leave, and the child was, in the middle.
Suddenly, Jones's men tried to knife the congressman.
I stood up and had been talking with the two attorneys for the temple, and suddenly the knife was around my neck.
You're convinced he was trying to kill you. Where was the knife?
In his very large left hand.
They got as far as the landing strip and were ambushed.
When they were ambushed, Ryan and 4 others, including NBC News correspondent Don Harris and photojournalist Bob Brown, were killed. NBC soundman Steve Sung was wounded. Spear was shot 5 times at point-blank range. And back at the compound, Jones led more than 900 of his followers to their deaths after instructing them to drink.
40 years, Jonestown has been like a sniper that every now takes a shot at me.
Yesterday in California, the first of dozens of caskets were put beneath the surface of the earth. They are the remains of some of those who died at the Jonestown Commune in Guyana. It is part of the tragic story that even to now is not over. Vern Hawkins has a report.
Just before dawn, a van carrying 50 victims arrived at Evergreen Cemetery. Inside, small pine boxes containing 45-inch steel caskets to be placed in cement crypts. These are the bodies of unidentified children. In place of names, just numbers on the boxes. This is the first of 248 unidentified followers to be buried here. Other cemeteries had refused. The containers were moved into the 60 by 80-foot mass grave, which will have a single marker. Relatives came to watch. Florence Brown's 4 grandchildren were never identified. She said they had to be here, somewhere. Freddie Lewis's entire family died in Guyana. Only the older members were identified.
Wife and sister, 2 older daughters. My 2 older daughters are Lisa and Karen. They've been identified already. The other kids hasn't been identified yet.
They may be here.
They may be here, might be on their way. Who knows?
The Council of Churches held brief services. Services they will repeat. 4 more van loads are scheduled here.
Spirit of the departed has returned to God, who gave it. We therefore commit his body to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust.
Vern Hawkins in Oakland for the 10 o'clock news.
The General Accounting Office has issued a report finding that Secretary of State Cyrus Vance acted properly in spending more than $4 million of taxpayers' money following last November's mass killings in Jonestown, Guyana. The money being used to recover the more than 900 bodies. Mary Tillison reports.
The nightmare at Jonestown left more than 900 members of the People's Temple dead. Americans who had followed the Reverend Jim Jones into the Guyanese jungle in search of a better life. The confusion that followed their mass slaughter has turned into a massive expense for the U.S. government. The State Department so far has spent almost $4,400,000 airlifting the bodies out of Jonestown to Dover, Delaware. There will probably be more money spent burying several hundred bodies that remain at Dover unclaimed. Rhode Island Congressman Edward Beard asked the General Accounting Office to investigate whether taxpayers should have to bear that multi-million-dollar expense. The GAO report, made public today, says the Secretary of State apparently decided money spent in connection with the Jonestown massacre was in the national interest. While GAO concedes some may disagree with that decision, the Accounting Office found no legal basis for judging U.S. assistance to Guyana improper. The Justice Department has filed suit against the People's Temple to force it to reimburse taxpayers.
Be the most hated man on the planet. You know, my name will be on everybody's lips.
The year was 1927. The place, a forgotten corner of Indiana. A child was born. James Warren Jones, they called him. An unremarkable name. An unremarkable beginning. But this child, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't destined for a life of normalcy. He was destined for something far darker. Little did they know, this small-town boy, fueled by a hunger for power, would one day lead them all down a path of unimaginable horror. Indiana, a place of rolling hills and quiet towns. But beneath the surface, a darkness stirred. The Ku Klux Klan cast a long shadow over the state. Prejudice and fear were woven into the fabric of everyday life. It was here, in this environment of hate, that Jim Jones learned his first lessons in manipulation. He saw how fear could be a weapon, how it could be used to control and dominate. He studied the tactics of the Klan, their methods of intimidation, their mastery of propaganda. He saw the power they wielded, and he craved it for himself. Indianapolis, a bustling city, a world away from rural Indiana. It was here that Jim Jones began to build his empire. He founded his own church, a small, unassuming place called the People's Temple. He preached a message of love and acceptance. He welcomed everyone, regardless of race, creed, or social standing. People flocked to his sermons, the poor, the marginalized, the lost and lonely. They found solace in his words, in his promise of a better world. He offered them a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. Childhood, a time of innocence, of wonder, not for Jim Jones. His childhood was a breeding ground for darkness. Born in the rural backwater of Crete, Indiana, he was a stranger in a strange land. His father, James Thurman Jones, was a broken man, physically scarred and emotionally distant, haunted by his experiences in World War I. Lynetta Putnam Jones, Jim's mother, was a woman of contradictions. Strong-willed and independent, she yearned for stability, for a traditional family life that seemed to elude her. She poured her energy into her son, desperate to provide him with the love and support that seemed to be missing from her own life. Lynetta Jones, recognizing her son's intelligence and his thirst for knowledge, encouraged his intellectual pursuits. She saw in him a spark of greatness, a potential that transcended their humble beginnings. She pushed him academically, nurturing his love of reading and his burgeoning oratorical skills. She envisioned a bright future for her son, one far removed from the poverty and despair that surrounded them. But Lynetta's ambitions for her son were often at odds with the reality of their situation. Their relationship, while built on a foundation of love and support, was also marked by tension and conflict. Jim, acutely aware of his mother's sacrifices, felt the weight of her expectations. He craved her approval, her recognition of his own growing sense of self-importance. He sought to emulate the charismatic figures he encountered in the Pentecostal churches they frequented, captivated by their ability to command attention and inspire devotion. As Jim grew older, he became increasingly withdrawn, seeking solace in his books and his own thoughts. The world beyond Crete, Indiana, beckoned to Jim Jones, offering a larger stage for his burgeoning ambitions. He moved to Indianapolis, a bustling city, teeming with opportunity and despair. It was here, amidst the urban sprawl and the social upheaval of the post-war years, that he encountered a figure who would have a profound impact on his life. Father Divine. Father Divine, born George Baker, was a charismatic black religious leader who proclaimed himself God. He preached a message of racial equality, economic empowerment, and spiritual enlightenment, attracting a diverse following that transcended racial and social barriers. His movement, the International Peace Mission movement, established heavens across the United States, offering food, shelter, and a sense of community to those marginalized by society. Jones, drawn to Father Divine's charisma and his message of social justice, attended several of his rallies. He was captivated by the man's ability to command the attention of thousands, to inspire unwavering devotion in his followers. He witnessed firsthand the power of belief, the way Father Divine's teachings offered hope and a sense of belonging to those who felt lost and forgotten. But Jones's interest in Father Divine went beyond mere admiration. Indianapolis, in the 1950s, was a city of stark contrasts. Post-war prosperity coexisted with grinding poverty, and racial tensions simmered beneath the surface of everyday life. The city's African-American community, relegated to segregated neighborhoods and denied equal opportunities, faced discrimination and prejudice at every turn. It was a powder keg of frustration and resentment, ripe for the picking by anyone who could tap into the community's yearning for change and its hunger for hope. Jim Jones, with his sharp intellect and his growing understanding of the power of belief, recognized the opportunity that Indianapolis presented. He saw a city teeming with potential followers, people disillusioned by the empty promises of traditional religion and desperate for a leader who could offer them a better life. He understood the power of fear and resentment, the way these emotions could be manipulated to control and dominate. Drawing inspiration from Father Divine's message of racial equality and economic empowerment, Jones began to craft his own unique brand of religious rhetoric. He preached a message of radical inclusivity, welcoming people of all races, creeds, and social backgrounds into his fold. He spoke out against the injustices faced by Indianapolis's black community, railing against segregation, police brutality, and the systemic racism that permeated every aspect of American life. In 1955, Jim Jones founded his own church in Indianapolis. A small, unassuming storefront he christened the People's Temple. It was a humble beginning for a man with such grand ambitions, but Jones understood the importance of starting small, of building a solid foundation for the empire he envisioned. He poured his energy into his sermons, honing his oratorical skills, perfecting his ability to captivate an audience and manipulate their emotions. Jones's message was a potent cocktail of Christianity, socialism, and self-empowerment. He preached a gospel of love and acceptance, urging his followers to embrace racial equality and social justice. He railed against the evils of capitalism, advocating for a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources. He promised his followers a better life, a world free from want and oppression, but only if they were willing to follow him, to trust him implicitly, to surrender their will to his. As his congregation grew, so too did Jones's control over their lives. He established a system of rules and regulations governing every aspect of their existence, from their clothing to their hairstyles, to their relationships with those outside the temple. He demanded absolute loyalty and obedience, rewarding those who followed his dictates and punishing those who dared to question his authority. Word spread like wildfire through Indianapolis. People talked about the charismatic young preacher who offered hope to the hopeless. They flocked to the People's Temple drawn in by Jones's message of love, acceptance, and radical equality. The downtrodden, the marginalized, the lost souls searching for meaning in a world that seemed to have forgotten them. They found solace in his words, in the warmth of the community he was building. The temple became a melting pot of races and backgrounds, a stark contrast to the segregated reality of 1950s America. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. They sat side by side, united under the banner of Father's love. Jones preached against the evils of racism, the poison of prejudice. He called for a revolution of the soul, a world where color no longer divided, where everyone was treated with dignity and respect. He offered a vision of true equality, a utopia built on the foundations of love and understanding. And as the People's Temple grew, so did Jones's control. He demanded absolute loyalty and instilled fear of the outside world. He convinced them he alone held the key to their salvation. Bizarre rituals and public confessions solidified his control. Informants created paranoia and suspicion. Dissenters faced brutal punishment. He demanded to be called Father, controlling every aspect of their lives. Families were torn apart in the name of Father's love. Defectors faced Jones's wrath and enforcers. Miracles and money. The business of faith. Jones, a master manipulator, understood the power of spectacle. He staged elaborate healing ceremonies, claiming to cure everything from cancer to blindness. The sick and desperate flocked to the temple, hoping for a miracle. These staged events solidified Jones's hold over his followers and filled the temple coffers. Money flowed in from donations, tithes, and business ventures. He encouraged followers to turn over their life savings, promising security and salvation. He preached that material possessions were meaningless, a distraction from enlightenment. He instilled a culture of sacrifice and blind faith. Jones lived in luxury while his followers toiled tirelessly. He amassed a fortune, justifying his lifestyle as a necessity. The more power Jones accumulated, the more erratic his behavior became. His sermons descended into rambling diatribes filled with paranoia. He demanded absolute loyalty, subjecting followers to humiliating rituals. The line between devotion and delusion blurred, transforming the temple into a prison. He railed against enemies, accusing them of plotting against him. The People's Temple, once a beacon of hope, became a prison of Jones's making. From Indianapolis to Ukiah, a new promised land. By the late 1960s, Jones's grip on reality was slipping. His paranoia intensified, fueled by drugs. He spoke of a coming apocalypse, a nuclear holocaust. He convinced his followers to escape to Ukiah, California. He envisioned it as a sanctuary for the People's Temple. He ordered his followers to sell their possessions and follow him. Hundreds journeyed west, their faith in Father unshaken. Ukiah was far from the paradise Jones had promised. The temple purchased properties, housing followers in poor conditions. The work was hard, the days long, and the rules strict. Jones ruled with an iron fist, his paranoia growing. He monitored their lives, forbidding contact with the outside world. He implemented suicide drills, rehearsing for horrors to come. He preached of obedience and self-sacrifice. He demanded unwavering loyalty and complete surrender. He had become a god in their eyes. They were prepared to follow him anywhere, even to their deaths. The gathering storm, whispers of dissent. Despite the atmosphere of fear, whispers of dissent began to circulate. The cracks in Jones's facade were impossible to ignore. His erratic behavior alienated his followers. They had sacrificed everything, yet the promised utopia seemed further away. A growing number began to question Jones's motives. They had witnessed his cruelty firsthand. They had seen the fear in their fellow members. They had heard rumors of beatings and abuse. The seeds of doubt took root. Defections began, risking everything to escape. They carried harrowing stories of life inside the temple. They spoke out, determined to expose the truth. Jones, enraged, lashed out, his paranoia growing. He saw enemies everywhere. He became increasingly isolated, surrounded by loyalists. He spoke of revolutionary suicide, a final act of defiance. Jones had become a prisoner of his own paranoia, and the People's Temple, once a beacon of hope, was about to become a tomb. Ukiah was supposed to be a sanctuary, a haven from the prying eyes of the outside world. But Jones's paranoia only intensified in the isolation of the redwood forests. That place was San Francisco. In the mid-1970s, the People's Temple established a presence in the city. Jones, always a master showman, recognized the opportunity that San Francisco presented. But beneath the veneer of respectability, Jones's grip on reality continued to slip.
My name will be...
The People's Temple, once a beacon of hope, had become a prison of its own making. The air in the San Francisco Temple crackled with tension. Jones, fueled by drugs and delusions, saw enemies everywhere. The CIA, FBI, rival groups, even his family, all were plotting against him. He railed against them in his sermons, demanding absolute loyalty. The system of informants expanded, creating a web of suspicion. Friends spied on friends, children on parents, all terrified of incurring Father's wrath. To question him was to risk being branded a traitor. Jones's paranoia became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more he isolated his followers, the more justified his fears seemed. Defections became a steady stream, fueling Jones's paranoia. He began to speak openly about revolutionary suicide. He told his followers that death was not to be feared. He spoke of it with such conviction that his followers began to believe him. The line between life and death blurred, and the People's Temple became a cult of death. As Jones' grip on reality loosened, his grip on his followers tightened. He formed the Red Brigade, enforcing his will with guns and clubs. They patrolled the temple grounds, instilling fear. The White Knights began with whispers of attacks. Jones, over loudspeakers, roused followers with paranoia. He claimed safety required ultimate sacrifice. Rehearsals for death began. Jones forced followers to drink supposed poison. He had broken them. As Jones's behavior became more erratic, the desire for escape intensified among some members of the People's Temple. Families huddled in hushed whispers, knowing the risks of incurring Father's wrath. Escape attempts, though fraught with danger, became more frequent. Some tried to slip away under the cover of darkness, praying they wouldn't be spotted. Those who were caught faced swift and brutal punishment. Children were torn from their parents, forced to pledge allegiance to Jones. The crushing weight of fear silenced those who still harbored doubts. Jonestown, the promised utopia, had become a prison. Jonestown, once a symbol of hope, it became a prison of despair. Carved out of the Guyana jungle, it was meant to be a socialist paradise. Instead, it became a prison, guarded and filled with fear, grueling work, scarce food, and constant surveillance defined life. Jones controlled everything, rewarding loyalty, punishing dissent. Nights echoed with Jones's sermons, instilling fear. His paranoia and control were absolute. Surrounded by loyalists, he ruled with an iron fist. Public punishments were a constant reminder of his power. Children were indoctrinated, separated from their parents. The outside world became a distant memory. Communication was censored, escape impossible. Attempts to escape were met with brutal punishment. Fear and control were pervasive. Promised paradise, they lived in hell. San Francisco was a powder keg. Whispers of the People's Temple's dark underbelly were starting to surface. Defectors shared their stories of abuse and manipulation. Journalists began to sniff around Jones's facade. The scrutiny grew more intense each day. Jones, paranoid, needed an escape route. His gaze fell upon Guyana, a country with a socialist government, vast tracts of undeveloped land far from prying eyes, the perfect solution for his utopia, a place where followers lived by his rules. He called it his Guyana Project, a new world order, free from corruption, a tropical paradise in harmony with nature, needs provided for, souls nourished by Father's love, promised freedom, equality, and purpose, a life dedicated to a better world. But beneath the utopian rhetoric, a darker truth festered. Guyana was about control, isolating followers from outside influence, creating a world where he was a god, a prison disguised as a paradise. Followers, blinded by faith and fear, marched willingly towards their doom. Section 2. Exodus. Journey to the Heart of Darkness. The exodus began slowly, a trickle of the most devoted, making their way to Jonestown. They were the pioneers, tasked with carving a civilization out of the dense wilderness. They toiled tirelessly under the scorching sun, driven by fear and faith. As the months passed, the trickle became a flood. Plane loads of temple members arrived, their lives now under Jones's control. But the paradise Jones had promised was nowhere to be found. The living conditions were cramped, the food scarce, the work endless. Jones, isolated in his compound, ruled with an iron fist. His voice, amplified over loudspeakers, was a constant presence. The jungle, once a symbol of freedom, had become a cage. Section 3. Jonestown's Iron Grip. Paradise lost. Control absolute. Jonestown was a panopticon, a prison where every aspect of life was controlled, monitored, and manipulated. Work was mandatory for all, from the youngest child to the most elderly resident. Those who faltered were punished swiftly and brutally. Jones controlled every aspect of life in Jonestown. He dictated what they ate, what they wore, what they thought. He forbade any contact with the outside world. To maintain control, Jones employed a sophisticated system of surveillance. Informants, known as angels, were everywhere. The threat of betrayal bred paranoia and a chilling silence. Families were torn apart, children indoctrinated with Jones' ideology. He encouraged relationships outside of marriage to weaken family bonds. He demanded absolute loyalty and devotion. He had become a god in their eyes, and they were prepared to follow him into the abyss. Section 4. The Gathering Storm. Cracks in the facade. Seeds of doubt. The facade of Jonestown, the utopian mask carefully crafted for the outside world, was beginning to crack. Defectors, risking their lives to escape the jungle prison, carried with them harrowing stories of abuse, manipulation, and Jones's descent into madness. Their accounts, published in newspapers and broadcast on television, painted a chilling picture of life under Jones's tyrannical rule. The world, once content to ignore the rumors, was starting to take notice. The media, sensing a story, descended upon Jonestown, their cameras capturing the squalor, the fear, and the desperation that lurked beneath the surface of Jones's carefully constructed paradise. Jones, enraged by this intrusion, lashed out, his paranoia reaching fever pitch. He railed against the persecutors, the enemies who were trying to destroy his utopia. He accused the media of fabricating stories, of being part of a grand conspiracy to discredit him and his followers. But the seeds of doubt had been sown. The defectors' stories, the media reports, the whispers of discontent that filtered into Jonestown through smuggled letters and clandestine phone calls, all chipped away at the wall of fear and control that Jones had so carefully erected. Some temple members, their faith shaken by the revelations, began to question Jones's motives, his sanity, his very humanity. They saw the fear in the eyes of their fellow members, the desperation masked by forced smiles and rote pronouncements of loyalty. They heard the rumors of beatings, of sexual abuse, of disappearances that were never explained. They felt the suffocating weight of Jones's control, the ever-present threat of his wrath. The dream of Jonestown, the hope of a better world, was fading, replaced by a growing sense of dread, a chilling premonition that something terrible was about to happen. News of turmoil in Jonestown reached Congressman Leo Ryan, a California Democrat. Concerned by abuse allegations, Ryan decided to investigate firsthand. He assembled a delegation of journalists, relatives, and a legal team. Their mission: to uncover the truth and help those wanting to leave. Jones allowed the visit, hoping to counter negative press. He orchestrated a stage-managed tour, hiding darker truths. Some members slipped notes to reporters, pleading for help. As Ryan's delegation prepared to leave, they were ambushed. Ryan, 3 journalists, and a temple member were killed. The massacre was a catalyst, leading to a horrific mass suicide. The air in Jonestown hung heavy, thick with the stench of fear and impending doom. The jungle fell eerily silent, as if even nature itself held its breath. The sun cast long, grotesque shadows across the settlement. The massacre at the airstrip shattered any remaining illusion of normalcy. Jones, hoarse with rage, addressed his followers over the loudspeakers. He spoke of betrayal, enemies closing in, and a world consumed by evil. He told them there was only one way out, one final act of defiance. He called it revolutionary suicide, a glorious ascension to a higher plane. His words echoed through the clearing, a macabre soundtrack to the nightmare. Many followers, their spirits broken, nodded in grim acceptance. They had sacrificed everything for Father. Now he asked for the ultimate sacrifice. Others hesitated, their eyes searching for an escape route that no longer existed. Dissent was now met with swift and brutal retribution. The Red Brigade, Jones's loyal enforcers, fanned out through the crowd. They carried syringes filled with cyanide and sedatives, prepared to usher the residents into oblivion.
Everywhere I go, they be like, "Hey, yo, Nick! Hey, yo, Nick! How you level up like that?"
A vat filled with a purplish liquid sat in the center of the pavilion, its metallic sheen glinting ominously in the fading light. The air, thick with the cloying scent of artificial grape flavoring, served only to heighten the sense of unreality that had descended upon Jonestown. This was no ordinary drink, no refreshing beverage to quench a tropical thirst. This was the elixir of death, Jones's final solution, the poisoned chalice from which all of Jonestown would partake. Mothers, their faces etched with a terrible mixture of grief and resignation, ushered their children towards the vat. their voices trembling as they repeated Jones's pronouncements. Their words hollow echoes of a madness they no longer questioned. They told their children not to be afraid, that this was the only way to escape the evils of the outside world, the only way to be reunited with Father in a paradise beyond the reach of pain and suffering. The children, their innocence a stark contrast to the unfolding horror, cried out for their mothers, their small voices lost in the cacophony of sobs, pleas, and the chillingly calm instructions issued over the loudspeakers. Some went willingly, their young minds unable to comprehend the finality of what was happening. Their trust in the adults around them, in the man they called Father, still tragically intact. Others resisted, their small bodies writhing in the grasp of the adults, tasked with administering the deadly concoction, their screams echoing through the clearing. A chorus of innocence sacrificed on the altar of Jones's madness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Jonestown in an eerie twilight, the scene took on a nightmarish, almost ritualistic quality. The loudspeakers blared hymns, their cheerful melodies a jarring counterpoint to the gruesome spectacle unfolding below. Jones, his voice amplified, his words laced with a terrifying calm, orchestrated the deaths of his followers like a conductor leading an orchestra. His movements a grotesque parody of a man conducting a sacred ceremony. The poisoned chalice passed from hand to hand, became a symbol of Jones's absolute power, a testament to the depths of his delusion and the tragic consequences of unquestioning faith. Section 3. The children. First. Innocence sacrificed. The cries of the children pierced the humid night air, a stark counterpoint to the hushed whispers of the adults around them. Their innocence a stark contrast to the depravity of the scene unfolding around them. Jones insisted that the children be given the potion first, a final twisted act of mercy, to spare them the pain of witnessing the deaths of their parents. He told his followers that the children would ascend to paradise first. One by one, the children of Jonestown were led to their deaths. Mothers held their children close, whispering words of comfort and love. Some convinced themselves this was an act of mercy. Others understood the true horror, but felt powerless to resist. The silence after the last child had taken the poison was deafening. Jones spoke of sacrifice, of revolution, of a world reborn. But his words rang hollow, drowned out by the cries of the dead. Section 4. Death in the Jungle. A landscape of horror. The air in the pavilion grew thick and heavy, the silence broken only by the groans of the dying and the desperate gasps for air. Bodies lay scattered across the pavilion floor, their limbs contorted, faces frozen in terror and pain. Jones, his voice hoarse but steady, urged his followers to embrace death and join him in paradise. As the night wore on, the pavilion at Jonestown transformed into a landscape of unimaginable horror. Section 5. Legacy of a Madman. Echoes of Jonestown. The sun rose over Jonestown, casting a pale, sickly light on the carnage. The silence, broken only by the buzz of flies and the cries of carrion birds, was deafening. The world outside, oblivious to the horror, continued to spin, unaware of the scale of the tragedy. Over 900 souls lay dead, their lives extinguished in a horrific act of mass suicide. News of the Jonestown massacre sent shockwaves across the globe. The world, struggling to comprehend the scale of the tragedy, recoiled in horror. How could such a thing happen? How could so many be persuaded to take their own lives, to murder their own children? The answers lay buried in the rubble of Jonestown, in the twisted wreckage of a mind consumed by paranoia and power. The legacy of Jonestown is a complex and troubling one. It stands as a stark warning against the dangers of unchecked charisma and the seductive power of cult leaders. It is a reminder that paradise often comes at a terrible price, and that freedom, once surrendered, can be a terrible thing to reclaim. But Jonestown is also a story of resilience, of the enduring strength of the human spirit. It is a story of those who escaped, who survived to tell their tales, their voices trembling with outrage and grief. It is a story that demands to be heard, a cautionary tale for a world still grappling with the seductive allure of cults. The echoes of Jonestown, faint but persistent, continue to reverberate through the decades. A chilling reminder of the thin line between faith and fanaticism. Section 1. The world reacts. Horror, disbelief, and the search for answers. The news spread like wildfire, engulfing the globe in horror and disbelief. Images flickered across screens, showing the tragedy's scale. Bodies lay strewn across a pavilion, lifeless eyes staring vacantly. Men, women, and children, faces frozen in death, were victims of a man-made catastrophe. A man-made apocalypse born of madness and manipulation. The world grappled with the enormity of the Jonestown massacre. How could so many be driven to such a horrific act? How could a charismatic leader orchestrate such deaths? Questions swirled, demanding answers, but they seemed elusive. The media scrambled to make sense of the tragedy. Reporters captured the gruesome aftermath, recording the stunned silence. The world watched, transfixed and horrified as details emerged. The search for answers took many forms. Journalists pieced together the fragmented narrative of a community seduced by a charismatic leader. Psychologists and cult experts analyzed Jones's hold over his followers. Even the most thorough investigations couldn't fully explain the depths of Jones's depravity. Section 2. Unhealed wounds, survivors, families, and the lingering trauma. The survivors of Jonestown, haunted by memories, carried physical and emotional scars. Families struggled with grief and anger, their loved ones' dreams extinguished. The trauma left an indelible mark, on the American psyche, shattering illusions about cults. Survivors and families honor their loved ones, sharing stories to prevent future tragedies. Their resilience and hope serve as a testament to the human spirit. Section 3. The Enduring Shadow. Cults, charisma, and the fragility of belief. The Jonestown Massacre is a chilling reminder of the fragility of belief and the seductive power of charisma. It serves as a cautionary tale for a world still grappling with the phenomenon of cults. Jonestown underscores the importance of critical thinking and questioning authority. It highlights the dangers of groupthink and the thin line between faith and fanaticism. The legacy of Jonestown, though tragic, carries a glimmer of hope. It reminds us that the human spirit, with its capacity for critical thinking, can ultimately prevail. In a shadowy underworld of crime, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, you've been journeying with me, Jason King. We've dissected the minds of some of the most notorious serial killers, peeling back the layers of their darkest secrets. Every shadowy corner we've turned, every chilling confession we've analyzed, has been a step deeper into the abyss. But remember, the abyss also gazes back. So, brace yourself as we prepare to dive even deeper. Next time, we'll unravel a tale so twisted it will make your spine tingle with anticipation. An enigma so intricate it will have you questioning everything you thought you knew. Until then, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. This is Jason King, signing off.